On the morning of August 16th, 1942, World War II cast a dark shadow over every corner of America. The California coast was no longer a radiant stretch of golden sand basking in sunlight, but a defiant fortress where the U.S. Navy stood watch with steely, vigilant eyes. Just months earlier, Japan had dealt a painful blow. The lumber ship SS Cynthia Olsen was sunk off the coast, 1,200 miles from Pearl Harbor, a stark warning that the enemy could strike anywhere, anytime. The Pacific Ocean had become an unforgiving battlefield where Japanese submarines lurked beneath the waves, stalking like ghostly predators. At Treasure Island, a naval base near San Francisco, the air was heavy with the briny scent of sea salt mixed with the acrid tang of engine oil, as if war had seeped into every breath. In the distance, the Golden Gate Bridge loomed through the fog, not just a symbol of America, but a silent sentinel, bearing witness to a nation teetering on the edge of life and death. Amid this storm of war, the U.S. Navy unleashed an unusual weapon, the L-class airship. Don't mistake them for whimsical balloons drifting at a county fair. These gentle giants were true war machines, armed with Mark 17 depth bombs and 30 caliber machine guns, ready to reduce any Japanese submarine to wreckage on the ocean floor. They were slow, yes, but their ability to hover for hours in the sky made them unblinking eyes, capable of spotting a glistening oil slick or the faint silhouette of a periscope from miles away. After the Pearl Harbor catastrophe, fear had taken root deep in the hearts of every sailor on the West Coast. Every shadow beneath the water, every strange sound in the night could signal an imminent attack. A single unusual ripple was enough to put an entire base on high alert, weapons at the ready, like warriors in a Hollywood epic, bracing for the final battle. In this taut, nerve-wracking atmosphere, two naval aviators stepped into the story. Lieutenant Jake Harper, 27, and Ensign Mike Sullivan, 32. They were seasoned soldiers with more flight hours than the lines at in and out during rush hour. Jake was the life of the party, always ready with a quip about choking down turkey MREs on Thanksgiving or comparing the airship to a flying football. His smile was like sunshine, warm enough to cut through the biting chill of San Francisco's fog. Mike, on the other hand, was a rock, calm to the point of seeming almost mechanical. He checked the radio as if it were his only lifeline to the world, each button pressed with meticulous care. Both were as fit as college football stars, trained to face any challenge, from raging storms at sea to ambushes by Japanese submarines. They weren't just comrades, they were brothers, bound by courage and camaraderie, values that every American holds dear. Jake and Mike were assigned to L-8, an airship the crew nicknamed Lucky 8, a hopeful charm in the face of life-or-death stakes. But during downtime in the mess hall, a few young sailors, perhaps after a late-night Taco Bell run, dubbed it Taco Bay, a name both silly and endearing, the kind of humor American troops use to transform fear into laughter. Their mission that day seemed simple: take off from Treasure Island, fly to the Farallon Islands, 30 miles offshore, scout for signs of enemy submarines, and return before lunch. The Farallon Islands, known as the Devil's Teeth, were no friendly destination. Jagged cliffs and waters teeming with great white sharks made the place feel like a slice of hell in the middle of the ocean, a spot only the boldest dared approach. For Jake and Mike, it was just another day on the job, no different from patrolling Fort Bragg or standing guard off San Diego. They climbed into the gondola, ready to face anything, from thick fog to the silhouette of a Japanese sub. Everything seemed under control, like a peaceful morning before a storm rolls in. But war, as any veteran will tell you, is never simple. Behind the calm of that morning, a mystery was brewing. L8 wasn't just a war machine. It was about to become a witness to a story beyond imagination. As Jake and Mike fired up the engines, the airship's roar blended with the heartbeat of America. Powerful, resolute, yet tinged with unease. They had no idea this flight would etch their names into one of World War II's greatest mysteries, a tale that even the sharpest minds at the Pentagon couldn't unravel. The fog enveloping Treasure Island was thick and cold, like a prophecy of what was to come. The Golden Gate Bridge, though standing tall in the dawn's light, seemed to watch in silence, as if it knew Lucky 8 wouldn't return as planned. The story begins with courage and curiosity, two values that have shaped America since its founding days. Jake and Mike, with their optimistic smiles and steady hands, embodied that spirit. They flew into the fog, heedless of danger, driven by one goal: to protect their homeland. But the Farallones, at dawn on August 16th, 1942, the sun still lingered somewhere below the horizon, leaving California's sky shrouded in a thick fog, like a veil concealing the ocean's secrets. At Treasure Island, the naval base near San Francisco, the air thrummed with the roaring engines of the L8 airship, poised to depart. In the cramped gondola, Lieutenant Jake Harper and Ensign Mike Sullivan prepared for their mission, exuding the confidence of soldiers who had faced danger countless times. They stepped aboard like warriors gearing up for a Hollywood war flick's Omaha Beach landing, their eyes sharp, movements crisp, as if neither fog nor sea could halt their advance. The L8's gondola was so small it felt like a Humvee stuffed with extra control panels, housing a radio, a life raft, 3 parachutes neatly hung on hooks, and a steaming coffee pot, the secret weapon keeping the crew alert through long patrols. Jake, with his blonde hair and roguish grin, was likely tossing out a jab about Mike's regulation buzz cut, comparing it to the fresh recruits at Fort Bragg. Mike, in contrast, was glued to the nautical chart, his finger tracing the route past the Golden Gate Bridge toward the Farallon Islands, a rugged cluster of rocky outcrops dubbed the Devil's Teeth by sailors. Not for their pristine beauty, but for their razor-sharp cliffs and pitch-black waters, where schools of great white sharks prowled like specters beneath the waves. To Jake and Mike, it was just another destination, no different from the Nevada desert or the jungles of Vietnam in the war stories they'd heard from veterans. As L8's engines roared to life, shaking the ground, the airship slowly lifted off from the base, gliding through the fog like a colossal ghost ship. It flew low, slicing through the biting cold air, carrying the pride of the U.S. Navy, soldiers ready to confront any threat, be it a Japanese submarine or a raging storm. Jake and Mike, in their cramped gondola, embodied courage and camaraderie, values that had shaped America through generations. They weren't just pilots, they were brothers, bound by tense flight hours, sleepless nights over bitter coffee, and an unwavering belief that every mission was a chance to protect their homeland. By 7:38 a.m., L8 was 4 miles from the Farallon, hovering at 200 feet, where the ocean stretched out like a vast emerald tapestry laced with unsettling dark patches. The radio crackled, and Jake's voice came through, steady as a quarterback calling plays in the Super Bowl. "Base, this is Lucky 8. Spotted an oil slick. Suspected submarine activity. Preparing to investigate." An oil slick on the water wasn't just a natural trace. It could be the breath of a Japanese submarine lurking beneath the waves, waiting to strike. After the SS Cynthia Olsen disaster, no sign was taken lightly. Jake and Mike dropped 2 smoke flares, their bright columns flaring on the sea's surface, marking the spot like a warning for any bombers in the area. In the distance, the freighter SS Albert Gallatin picked up the signal, instantly going on high alert, its deck guns swiveling toward the horizon, ready to fire. Nearby, the fishing boat Daisy May watched quietly, its first mate squinting through binoculars, swearing he saw Jake's blonde hair and Mike's dark buzz cut moving in the gondola, as vivid as characters in a black and white war film. For the next hour, L8 circled the oil slick, sometimes dipping as low as 30 feet above the waves, as if trying to peer through the inky water to spot an invisible enemy. The Daisy May's crew watched, hearts pounding, waiting for the moment a depth bomb would drop, tearing the sea apart. But nothing happened, save for the 2 initial smoke flares now faded in the wind. The scene was eerie, almost surreal, as if L8 were trapped in an invisible loop, endlessly circling without clear purpose. Jake and Mike stayed silent on the radio, not uncommon in high-stakes missions, but enough to make the commander at Treasure Island restless. He, perhaps sipping cold coffee, muttered about making them eat MREs for a month if they dared doze off. Deep down, though, he knew Jake and Mike weren't the type to slack. They were the best, forged through hundreds of flight hours, facing fog and towering waves without flinching. So why was the radio silent? Why did L8, the so-called Lucky 8, feel so unsettling? The fog off the Farallons seemed to thicken, a curtain hiding the ocean's ancient secrets. The Devil's Teeth weren't just a patrol point. They were a place where sea and sky merged, where tales of shipwrecks and lost sailors were whispered in harbor bars. As L8 looped over the water, its shape blurred in the mist like a ghost ship poised to enter the void. Jake and Mike, unaware, were inching closer to a mystery that would etch their names into history, not as triumphant heroes, but as witnesses to something beyond human comprehension. The airship's engines blended with the crashing Wamni. On the morning of August 16, 1942, as the clock struck 9 a.m., the L8 airship abruptly changed course, as if tugged by an invisible force back towards San Francisco. It jettisoned ballast, climbing higher, slicing through the dense fog like a ghostly ship seeking its harbor. From afar, sailors aboard the fishing boat Daisy May watched, breathing a sigh of relief, assuming Jake Harper and Mike Sullivan had completed their mission at the Farallon Islands. They pictured the 2 pilots, perhaps joking about grabbing In-N-Out burgers after their shift, soon landing at Treasure Island, where hot coffee and the laughter of comrades awaited. But that hope vanished swiftly. L8's radio remained silent, a chilling silence, like the ocean's whisper before a storm. No signals, no reports, only the vast emptiness and the airship's quiet drift. At Treasure Island's base, the air was heavy as lead. The commander, who had overseen hundreds of missions from here to San Diego, abandoned his cold coffee for cigarettes, pacing the operations room. His voice grew hoarse from barking orders, demanding every aircraft in the area keep an eye out for L8. Find that airship, even if you have to turn the Pacific upside down, he roared. Though deep down he knew Jake and Mike weren't the type to doze off on duty. 2 Kingfisher seaplanes were scrambled, their engines roaring as they took off, skimming over white-capped waves to search for traces of Lucky 8. Pilots squinted through windshields, straining to spot a massive silhouette in the gray sky. But L8, like a specter, seemed unwilling to be found, drifting through the clouds with an eerie purpose, as if it had a soul of its own, needing no pilots to guide it. Meanwhile, L8 continued its mysterious journey, gliding through the Pacific's icy winds. At 10:49 a.m., a Pan Am Clipper pilot on a commercial route suddenly spotted the airship above the Golden Gate Bridge, heading toward Treasure Island. Its silhouette emerged through the sea smooth and serene, like a scene from a Hollywood war epic. "Looks normal," the pilot reported, his voice steady, as if describing a sunny day. A nearby P-38 pilot, perhaps munching on a Snickers from his supply kit, chimed in over the radio. "Just another day for Taco Bay." The nickname, born from drunken nights at the base, carried a flicker of relief, as if L8 were simply doing its job, ferrying Jake and Mike back to banter and cold beers after their shift. But the relief was fleeting. Just 10 minutes later, at 10:59 a.m., a Kingfisher pilot patrolling the Pacific spotted L8 in a completely unexpected location. His voice trembled over the radio as if he'd seen the impossible. The airship was soaring through thick clouds at nearly 2,000 feet, 3 miles from Ocean Beach, southwest of the Golden Gate Bridge. 15 miles in 10 minutes. To move that fast, L8 would have needed to hit 90 miles per hour, far beyond its 60-mile-per-hour limit. It was impossible, as if the airship had teleported or time and space around it had warped. The Kingfisher pilot, squinting through the gray haze, watched L8's silhouette fade, like a ghost ship sinking into the void. He wondered, the airship's pressure valves should have vented helium at 2,100 feet, preventing it from climbing too high. If it was deflating, why was it still aloft? And more urgently, where were Jake and Mike? The fog off San Francisco seemed to thicken, a curtain hiding secrets the ocean refused to reveal. L8, once Lucky 8, now carried an ominous air like the protagonist in a Hitchcock thriller where normalcy masks something far more terrifying. At Treasure Island, the commander stubbed out his 5th cigarette, his eyes heavy with worry. He'd heard strange tales from veterans, ships vanishing in the Bermuda Triangle, pilots lost off Area 51. But this was California, the U.S. Navy's home turf, where everything was supposed to make sense. So why was L8 acting like a phantom? Why were Jake and Mike, his best pilots, silent as if swallowed by the sea? The Farallon Islands, where L8 had just been, were more than a patrol point. Sailors called them the Devil's Teeth, not just for their jagged rocks and sharks, but for whispered tales of shipwrecks and sailors vanishing without a trace. L8, in passing through those waters, seemed to have crossed an invisible boundary where the rules of the real world no longer applied. Its silhouette, now drifting among the clouds, carried a mystery no one at Treasure Island or even the Pentagon could unravel. The hum of its engines, if they still sounded, mingled with the crash of waves and the howl of wind, forming a somber symphony like the prelude to a tragedy. Jake and Mike, though still believed to be somewhere aboard, seemed to have become part of a larger story. A tale of courage, curiosity, and things beyond human understanding. As L8 vanished into the clouds, it left behind a haunting question. Was this airship truly Lucky 8? By noon on August 16, 1942, as the fog along California's coast began to lift, an eerie unease settled over San Francisco. At 11:15 a.m. on Ocean Beach, a swimmer battling the icy waves froze in shock. A massive shadow loomed overhead, skimming the water just 50 feet away. It was the L8 airship, nicknamed Lucky 8, but now it looked like a lost specter, flying so low it nearly kissed the waves. The swimmer scrambled ashore, heart pounding, narrowly escaping as L8 grazed the sand, then slammed into a steep cliff. A Mark 17 depth bomb broke free from the hull, and like a balloon with its tether cut, the airship lurched skyward, wobbling wildly. The swimmer stood, jaw agape, watching L8 drift over San Francisco's skyline, its helium bag sagging, scraping rooftops, snagging power lines, before crashing onto a residential street in Daly City, a weary steel beast finally collapsing. News of the crash spread like wildfire. Firefighters, police, and curious onlookers flocked to the scene, hearts torn between hope and dread. They expected to find Jake Harper and Mike Sullivan, the fearless naval aviators, perhaps injured but alive, ready to recount a tale of battling Japanese submarines or surviving an unexpected storm. Firefighters, faces smudged with soot, clambered over L8's wreckage, while police cordoned off the area, struggling to keep the crowd, folks raised on Hollywood war epics, at a safe distance. But when the gondola's door was pried open, a heavy silence fell. No Jake, no Mike. The cabin was empty, as if the two soldiers had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a mystery that sent chills through the city. The gondola's door, unlatched, swayed in the breeze like a portal to another dimension. A microphone dangled outside, its cord tangled, as if torn from someone's grasp in a moment of panic. The radio inside hummed steadily, its static buzz like a ghost's whisper refusing to fade. The life raft and 3 parachutes hung neatly on their hooks, untouched. The engines, one slightly damaged from the crash, still rumbled at idle, like the heartbeat of a machine unaware it had lost its soul. No blood, no signs of a struggle, no scrap of paper or distress signal. L8, once jokingly called Taco Bay in Treasure Island's mess hall, now lay still, cradling a secret no one could unravel. The crowd began to murmur, whispers spreading like sea breezes. A 17-year-old boy perched on a nearby hill with an old pair of binoculars swore he saw figures moving in the gondola as L8 drifted overhead. His eyes gleamed, voice brimming with certainty, as if recounting a scene from Star Wars. But when pressed, he faltered, admitting the fog might have clouded his mind. Nearby, a woman riding horseback near Ocean Beach, her hair neatly tied and eyes sharp, claimed she saw at least 3 figures in the cabin through the thinning mist. She insisted on the detail, then hesitated, conceding the dim light and damp air might have tricked her. The strangest tale came from a golfer at a nearby course who swore he saw someone parachuting from L8 as it hovered over the water. He described a white parachute flickering in the fog, like a slow-motion action film shot. Yet when police and Navy teams scoured the area, no trace of a parachute was found, as if the story were a figment of an imagination stirred by the bizarre event. Naval investigators accustomed to analyzing shipwrecks or combat reports stood before L8 with baffled expressions. They combed every inch of the gondola, searching for clues, a scratch, a fingerprint, anything to explain Jake and Mike's disappearance. But everything was intact, as if the airship had flown itself back to San Francisco without pilots. One investigator, perhaps familiar with UFO tales from Area 51, muttered, "This isn't some sci-fi cover-up, but damn, it's close." His colleague, cigarette pinched between fingers, just nodded, eyes heavy with helplessness. L8, with all its strangeness, seemed to defy every shred of logic the U.S. Navy had built over decades. San Francisco, the city of dreams and dazzling lights, now wore a somber hue. News of L8 swept through harbor bars, where sailors and locals whispered of the ghost airship. Stories of the Farallons, the Devil's Teeth, resurfaced. Tales of vanished ships and eerie shadows gliding over waves. L8, with its empty cabin and dangling microphone, became a symbol of a deeper mystery, an unanswered question. Where had Jake and Mike gone? Had they encountered something out there amid the fog and sea that humanity wasn't meant to know? Or were they simply victims of a freak accident, swallowed by the frigid ocean? As sunlight bathed Daly City, illuminating L8's wreckage, it offered no answers, only deepening the shadows of a story that would haunt America for decades. As the L8 airship lay motionless on a Daly City street, its empty gondola stood like a defiant challenge. The question of Jake Harper and Mike Sullivan's fate hung heavy in the air, as oppressive as the morning fog off San Francisco's coast. What had happened to the 2 naval aviators, those fearless soldiers who soared through the skies with the swagger of football stars? Each theory, whether grounded or outlandish, opened a door into darkness where the truth seemed forever lost between the ocean and the clouds. The simplest theory, and the one Navy investigators desperately wanted to believe, was a tragic accident. Perhaps Jake, with his blonde hair and curious streak, leaned too far out the gondola's door while inspecting the oil slick off the Farallon Islands. A moment of imbalance, a slip, and he plummeted into the inky black waters where great white sharks circled like living blades. Mike, with the loyalty of a battlefield brother, might have risked everything to save him, only to be swept away by the sea's merciless churn. The open gondola door, the microphone dangling as if torn from a hand, seemed to tell that story. A fleeting panic, a desperate effort, then silence. But this theory, though plausible, stumbled over pieces that didn't fit. L8 had flown back toward the Golden Gate Bridge, spotted by Pan Am and P-38 pilots, its path controlled as if someone were still at the helm. Moreover, sailors on the Daisy May, binoculars glued to the gondola, swore they saw both Jake and Mike moving inside, even after the two smoke flares were dropped into the sea. If both had fallen, who guided Lucky 8 home? A darker theory revolved around an enemy threat. Had Jake and Mike spotted a Japanese I-class submarine lurking beneath the oil slick and flown low to investigate? Perhaps they got too close, becoming targets of a sudden attack, captured or killed by the submarine's crew. This idea, as dramatic as a Hollywood war film scene, was riddled with holes. Why didn't they deploy the Mark 17 depth bombs, designed precisely for such encounters? And if both were gone, who piloted L8 across 30 miles back to San Francisco, gliding past the Golden Gate Bridge like a ghost ship that knew its way to port? Post-war Japanese records showed no captures tied to the incident, dissolving this theory like fog under sunlight. Bolder whispers began to circulate, especially in harbor bars where sailors sipped beers and spun tales of the strange. Some suggested Jake and Mike, for reasons no one could fathom, had deserted, abandoning their mission, fleeing the war, and vanishing like characters in a noir thriller. But this was almost absurd. Jake, with his roguish grin and Navy pride, and Mike, with a veteran's calm, weren't the type to turn their backs on their country in the heat of battle. They were soldiers forged through hundreds of flight hours, laughing over turkey MREs during long nights at Treasure Island. Desertion wasn't their story. Wilder theories, straight out of an X-Files episode, crept into the minds of dreamers. Had Jake and Mike encountered something unimaginable, a UFO lurking in the fog, or a spatial rift near the Farallon Islands? Those islands, dubbed the Devil's Teeth by sailors, had long carried an ominous reputation. Stories of shipwrecks and sailors vanishing without a trace were told in the dim glow of taverns. In 2007, computer scientist Jim Grayson, a seasoned sailor, also disappeared off the Farallons, his sailboat vanishing without a GPS signal or debris. Could some mysterious force beyond comprehension lurk in those waters? The idea, though far-fetched, sent shivers when paired with L8's eerie details. The most puzzling clue lay within the airship itself. When investigators examined L8, they found only 4 hours of fuel remained, despite departing with a tank full for 12 hours of flight. Someone or something had dumped over 30% of the fuel, perhaps to make the airship climb rapidly, as if fleeing or signaling. But fleeing what? A submarine? A supernatural phenomenon? Or just a desperate act in a moment of panic? The Navy's final report, cold and curt, declared, "No evidence the two men were aboard when it crossed land." Yet this clashed with what witnesses saw. The 17-year-old with binoculars, the horsewoman near Ocean Beach, and the golfer at the nearby course all swore they saw figures in the gondola, even as L8 drifted like a dying beast, deflating and staggering across the sky. Each theory, whether practical or fantastical, led to a dead end, leaving a void the truth refused to fill. Jake and Mike, with their courage and camaraderie, seemed to have become part of a larger mystery, a story beyond the logic of war or science. The Farallones, with their jagged teeth and haunting waters, might hold the key. A place where sea and sky merged, where cracks in reality yawned open. As dusk fell over San Francisco, L8's silhouette, now just lifeless metal, lingered in the minds of those who heard the tale. Jake and Mike might have fallen into the sea, been captured by enemies, or even been pulled into another dimension. But the only certainty was that their mystery, like the fog offshore, would never lift. Beneath San Francisco's fading sunset, as the last rays flickered over the Pacific, the Farallon Islands loomed like a specter in the fog. Their jagged rocks, dubbed the Devil's Teeth by sailors, stood defiant, as if guarding an ancient secret humanity was never meant to touch. From the shore, a chilling unease clung to every breath, as if the Farallones whispered tales of lost souls and ships that never returned. Jake Harper and Mike Sullivan, the naval aviators who once soared with the courage of American soldiers, vanished in those waters, leaving a haunting mystery, like a horror film with no final act. The U.S. Navy, with all its might, poured everything into the search. They swept sonar across every square meter of the Farallon seas, scouring white-capped waves and inky black depths where great white sharks prowled like ghostly predators. But no bodies, no debris, not a single trace of Jake or Mike. The Farallones, a graveyard of shipwrecks and shattered dreams, seemed to have swallowed them whole, as it had countless sailors over centuries. L8, the airship once called Lucky 8 in Treasure Island's mess hall jests, now lay as lifeless metal on a Daly City street, bearing a question no one could answer. Where had those two soldiers gone? Perhaps, as many hoped, it was just a tragic accident. Jake, with his roguish grin and curious streak, might have met a moment of bad luck, leaning too far out the gondola's door to inspect an oil slick offshore. A slip, and he plunged into the shark-infested waters of the Farallones. Mike, with the loyalty of a battlefield brother, might have leapt after him, a desperate bid to save his friend. But if that were true, why did L8 fly back to San Francisco, gliding past the Golden Gate Bridge with a seasoned pilot's precision? Why did witnesses on the Daisy May see their silhouettes in the gondola? And why did the airship keep aloft, as if guided by an unseen hand? That simple answer, though logical, couldn't fill the gaps in the story. A darker possibility crept into the minds of those daring to think beyond. Could the Farallones be hiding something beyond human understanding? Those islands, with their razor-sharp rocks and haunting waters, had long been whispered as cursed. Tales of shipwrecks and sailors vanishing without a trace echoed in harbor bars, where dim lights made everything more sinister. In 2007, Jim Grayson, a computer scientist and seasoned sailor, also vanished off the Farallones while scattering his mother's ashes. His sailboat disappeared, leaving no GPS signal or debris, as if erased from reality. Grayson's story, though 6 decades removed from L8, seemed to echo a strange pattern, one with the Farallones at its heart. I can't help but think of Flight 19, the 5 Navy bombers that vanished off the Bermuda Triangle 3 years later in 1945. Their compasses spun like roulette wheels. Pilots reported bizarre phenomena before disappearing forever. Could the Farallones be a West Coast counterpart to the Bermuda Triangle, a place where reality warps, where time and space defy rules? The idea, though straight out of an X-Files episode, chills when tied to L8's eerie details. Over 30% of its fuel dumped, as if someone fled something. Shadows seen by witnesses in the gondola, even as it drifted like a dying beast. And the utter silence of Jake and Mike, as if they'd stepped through a door with no return. For Jake and Mike's families, the pain came not just from loss, but from uncertainty. No bodies to bury, no final letter to read, no answers to soothe their hearts. They wondered if the two soldiers were heroes, chasing a Japanese submarine to the end, sacrificing themselves in silence to protect their homeland. Or were they victims of something greater, a mysterious force lurking in the Farallon Figue? A wilder thought, impossible to dismiss, lingered. Could Jake and Mike still be out there, trapped in a fold of time, forever circling that oil slick offshore, like phantoms imprisoned in another dimension? Those questions, like waves crashing on the shore, rose endlessly but brought no answers. San Francisco, with its twinkling lights and bustling streets, harbors a dark corner few mention. L8, or Taco Bay, as young sailors once called it, became legend, a story retold in bars where sailors sip beers and whisper of strange things. If you ever stand on San Francisco's shore, gazing toward the horizon where the Farallons flicker, take heed. If a shadow glides through the fog, faint like a ghostly ship, don't blink. It might be L8, still wandering, still searching for its crew, carrying a secret the sea and sky have locked away forever. And don't forget to share and subscribe to keep this mystery alive.